Hello, how are you? So here we have it. Final verdict. Wishing chair. Chapter 3. Where can the wishing chair be? Here we go. Who's taken our chair? Cried Peter in despair. We can't get back home now. Come back, chair! But the chair was under someone else's command now, and it took no notice. It rose higher and higher and was soon no more than a speck in the moonlight. The three stared at one another, very upset indeed. Our very first adventure, and the chair's gone, said Molly in a shaky voice. It's too bad. Right at the very beginning of the holidays too. Who was that taking our chair, do you know? Binky asked the witch, who was busy smoothing the surface of the water in the hole in the floor with what looked like a fine brush. The map that had shone there was now gone, and the water was empty of reflection or picture. The children wondered what would appear there next. The witch shook her head. No, I don't know, she said. I didn't hear anyone out there because I was so busy in here with you. All kinds of people come to ask me questions, you know, just as you did, and watch to see what appears in my magic pool. Some of the people are very odd. I expect it was one of them, and he saw your chair, knew what it was, and flew off in it at once. It would be very valuable to him. Oh, I do think it's bad luck, said Molly, tears coming into her eyes. Our very first night. And how are we going to get back home again? You can catch the dawn bus if you like, said the witch. It will be along here in a few minutes' time. As soon as the sky turns silver in the east, it comes rumbling along. Now listen, I can hear the bus. Wondering whatever kind of people caught the dawn bus, Molly and the others went to catch it. It came rumbling along, looking more like a toy bus than a real one. It was crammed with little folk of all kinds. Brownies with long beards leaned against one another, fast asleep. Two tiny fairies slept with their arms around each other. Oh. A wizard nodded off to sleep, his pointed hat getting more and more crooked each moment. And three goblins yawned so widely that their mischievous little faces seemed like all mouth. The bus is full, said Molly in dismay. Sit in the front with the driver then, said the witch. Go on, or you'll miss it. So Molly, Peter and Binky squashed themselves in front with the driver. He was a brownie, and wore his beard tied round his waist and made into a bow behind. It looked very odd. Plenty of room, he said, and moved up so far that he couldn't reach the wheel to drive the bus. You drive it, he said to Binky. And very pleased indeed, Binky took the wheel. But, goodness gracious me, Binky was no good at all at driving buses. He nearly hit a tree, swerved violently, and went into an enormous puddle that splashed everyone from head to foot, and then went into a ditch and out of it at top speed. By this time, all the passengers were wide awake and shouting an alarm. Stop him! He's mad! Fetch a policeman! The bus driver was upset to hear all the shouting. He moved back He moved back to his wheel so quickly that Binky was flung out into the road. He got up and ran after the bus, shouting. But the bus driver wouldn't stop. He drove on at top speed, though Molly and Peter begged him to go back for Binky. I don't know how to back this bus, said the brownie's driver solemnly. I keep meaning to learn, but I never seem to have time. Most annoying. Still, I hardly ever want to go back. Well, stop if you don't know how to back, cried Peter. But the brownie looked really horrified. What? Stop before I come to a stopping place? You must be mad. No, full speed ahead is my motto. I've got to get all these tired passengers back home as soon as possible. Why are they so tired? Asked Molly, seeing the wizard beginning to nod again. Well, they've all been to a moonlight dance, said the driver. Very nice dance too. I went to it. Last time I went to one, I was so tired when I drove my bus home that I fell asleep when I was driving it. Found myself in the land of dreamland in no time and used up every drop of my petrol. This all sounded rather extraordinary. Molly and Peter looked at him nervously, hoping that he wouldn't fall asleep this time. Molly could hardly keep her eyes open. She worried about Binky. Would he find his way back to the playroom all right? Oh, and oh dear, what were they going to do about the wishing chair? Just as she was thinking that, she fell sound asleep. Peter was already asleep. The driver looked at them, gave a grunt, and fell asleep himself. So, of course, the bus went straight on to Dreamland again. And when Peter and Molly awoke, they were not in the bus at all, but in their own beds. Molly tried to remember all that had happened. Was it real, or was it a dream? She thought she'd better go and ask Peter. She went to his room. He was sitting up in bed and rubbing his eyes. "I know what you've come to ask me," he said. "The same question I was coming to ask you. Did we dream it, or didn't we? And how did we get back here?" "The bus must have gone to the land of Dreamland again," said Molly. "But how we got here, I don't know. I'm still in my day clothes. Look." "So am I," said Peter, astonished. "Well, that shows it was real then. Oh dear, do you suppose Binky is back yet?" "Should we go and see now?" said Molly. But the breakfast bell rang just then. They cleaned their teeth, did their hair, washed and tidied their crumpled clothes. Then down they went. After breakfast they ran down to the playroom at the bottom of the garden. Binky was there. He was lying on the sofa, fast asleep. "Binky, wake up!" shouted Molly. He didn't stir. Molly shook him. "Don't wake me, Mother," murmured Binky, trying to turn over. "Let me sleep." "Binky, you're not at home. You're here," said Peter, shaking him again. Binky rolled over onto his other side and fell right off the sofa. That woke him with a jerk, and he gave a shout of alarm, opened his eyes and sat up. "I say, did you tip me off the sofa?" he said. "You needn't have done that." "We didn't. You rolled off all by yourself," said Molly with a laugh. "How did you get back last night, Binky?" "I walked all the way, so no wonder I'm tired this morning," said Binky, his eyes beginning to close again. "I did think you might have stopped the bus and picked me up." "The driver wouldn't stop," explained Peter. "He was awfully silly, really. We were very upset at leaving you behind." "The thing is, Binky, how are we going to find out where the wishing chair has gone?" said Peter seriously. "It's only the beginning of the holidays, you know, and if we don't get it back, the holidays will be very dull indeed." "Oh, I'm too sleepy to think," said Binky, and fell asleep again. Molly shook him impatiently. "Binky, do wake up. We really are very worried about the wishing chair." But there was no waking Binky this time. He was so sound asleep that he didn't even stir when Molly tickled him under his arms. The two children were disappointed. They stayed in the playroom till dinner time, but Binky still didn't wake up. They went indoors to have their dinner and then came down to see if Binky was awake yet. He wasn't. Just then there was a soft tapping at the door, and a little voice said, "Binky, are you there?" Peter opened the door. Outside stood a small elf, looking rather alarmed. He held a leaflet in his hand. "Oh, I'm very sorry," he said. "I didn't know you were here. I wanted Binky." "He's so fast asleep that we can't wake him," said Peter. "Can we give him a message?" "Yes, tell him I saw this notice of his," said the little elf, and showed it to the children. It was a little card printed in Binky's writing. "Lost or stolen, genuine wishing chair. Please give any information about it to Binky. I shall be in the playroom," in brackets. "Anything else?" asked Peter. "Well, you might tell him I think I know where the chair is," said the little elf shyly. "Do you?" cried both children. "Oh, well, tell us then. It's our chair." "There's to be a sale of furniture at a brownie shop not far away," said the elf, "and there are 6 old chairs to be sold. Now I know he only had 5, so where did the 6th one come from? Look, here's a picture of them." The children looked at the picture, and Peter gave a cry. "Why, they're exactly like our chair. Are they all wishing chairs then?" "Oh, no. Your chair is very unusual. I expect what happened is that the thief who flew off in your chair wondered how to hide it. He remembered somebody who had 5 chairs just like it and offered it to him to make the set complete." "I don't see why he should do that," said Molly, puzzled. "Wait," said the elf. "Nobody would suspect that one of the 6 chairs was a wishing chair, and I've no doubt that the thief will send someone to bid a price for all 6. And when he gets them, he will suddenly say that he has discovered one of them is a wishing chair and sell it to a wizard for a sack of gold." "I think that's a horrid trick," said Molly in disgust. "Well, it looks as if we'll have to go along to this furniture shop and have a look at the chairs to see if we can find out which one is ours. Oh dear, I do wish Binky would wake up." "You'd better go as soon as you can," said the elf. "The thief won't lose much time in buying it back, with the other chairs thrown in." So they tried to wake Binky again, but he just wouldn't wake up. "We'll have to go by ourselves," said Peter at last. "Elf, will you show us the way?" "You will? Right, then off we go. Leave your message on the table for Binky to see, then he'll guess where we've gone." That's the end of the chapter. So chapter 4, Hunting for the Chair. The elf took them in a very surprising way. He guided them to the bottom of the garden and through a gap in the hedge. Then he took them to the end of the field and showed them a dark ring of grass. "We call that a fairy ring," said Molly. "Sometimes it has little toadstools all the way round it." "Yes," said the elf. "Well, I'll show you a use for fairy rings. Sit down on the dark grass, please." So Molly and Peter sat down. They had to squeeze very closely together indeed, because the ring of grass was not large. The elf felt about in it as if he was looking for something. He found it and pressed hard. And down shot the ring of grass as if it were a lift. Grass, rather, as if it were a lift. The children, taken by surprise, gasped and held on to one another. They stopped with such a bump that they were shaken off the circle of grass and rolled away from it, over and over. "So sorry," said the elf. "I'm afraid I pressed the button rather hard. Are you hurt?" "No, not really," said Molly. As she spoke, she saw the circle of grass shoot up again and fit itself neatly back into the field. "Well, we do learn surprising things," she said. "What next, elf?" "Along this passage," said the elf, and trotted in front of them. It was quite light underground, though neither of the children could see where the lighting came from. They passed little brightly painted doors on their way, and Peter longed to rat-tat-tat at the knockers and see who answered. They came to some steps and went up them, round and round in a spiral stairway. Wherever were they coming to? At the top was a door. The elf opened it, and there they were in a small round room, very cosy indeed. "What a strange round room," said Peter, surprised. "Oh, I know why it's round. It's inside the trunk of a tree. I've been in a tree house before." "Guessed right, first time," said the elf. "This is where I live. I'd ask you to stop and have a cup of tea with me, but I think we'd better get on and see those chairs before anything happens to them." "Yes, so do I," said Peter. "Where's the door out of the tree?" It was fitted in so cunningly that it was impossible to see it unless you knew where it was. The elf went to it at once, of course, and opened it. They all stepped out into a wood. The elf shut the door. The children looked back at it. No, they couldn't possibly tell where it was now. It was so much part of the tree. "Come along," said the elf, and they followed him through the wood. They came to a lane and then to a very neat village. All the houses set in tiny rows, with a little square green in the middle, and 4 white ducks looking very clean on a round pond in the centre of the green. We have a picture. Isn't that sweet? There's the little elf, Molly and Peter. and the pond with the ducks and the little houses round it. How very proper, said Peter. Not a blade of grass out of place. This is Pin Village, said the elf. You've heard the saying, as neat as a pin, I suppose. Well, this is Pin, always very neat and tidy, and the people of the village, the Pins, never have a button missing or a hair blowing loose. The children saw that it was just as the elf said. The people were so tidy and neat that the children felt dirty and untidy at once. They all look a bit like Pins dressed up and walking about, said Molly with a giggle. Well, I'm glad I know what neat as a pin really means now. Do they ever run or make a noise or laugh? Shh, don't laugh at them, said the elf. Now look, do you see that shop at the corner? It isn't kept by a Pin, it's kept by Mr. Polish. He sells furniture. And he's called Polish because he's always polishing it, I suppose, said Molly with a laugh. Don't be too clever, said the elf. He doesn't do any polishing at all. His daughter Polly does that. Here's the shop, said Molly, and they stood and looked at it. She nudged Peter. Look, she whispered, 6 chairs, all exactly alike. How are we going to tell which is ours? Come and have a look, said Peter, and they were inside with the elf. A brownie girl was busy polishing away at the chairs, making them shine and gleam. There's Polly Polish, said Molly to Peter. She must have heard what they said and looked up, and she smiled. She was a nice little thing, with pointed ears like Binky and very green eyes. Hello, she said. Molly smiled back. These are nice chairs, aren't they? She said. You've got a whole set of them. Yes, my father, Mr. Polish, was very pleased, said Polly. He's only had 5 for a long time, and people want to buy chairs in 6s, you know. How did he manage to get the 6th one? Asked Peter. Oh, it was a great bit of luck, said Polly. There's a goblin called Tricky who came along and said he wanted to sell an old chair that had once belonged to his grandmother. And when he showed it to us, lo and behold, it was the missing 6th chair of our set. So we bought it from him, and there it is. I expect now we should be able to sell the whole set. Someone is sure to come along and buy it. Which chair did the goblin bring you? Asked Peter, looking hard at them all. I don't know now, said Polly, putting more polish on a duster and rubbing very hard at a chair. I've been cleaning them and moving them about, you know, and they're all mixed up. The children stared at them in despair. They all looked exactly like them. Oh dear, how could they possibly tell which was their chair? Then Polly said something very helpful, though she didn't know it. You know, she said, there's something strange about one of these chairs. I've polished and polished the back of it, but it seems to have a little hole there or something. Anyway, I can't make that little bit come bright and shining. The children pricked up their ears at once. Which chair? Said Peter. Polly showed them the one. It certainly looked as if it had a hole in the back of it. Peter put his finger there, but the hole wasn't a hole. He could feel quite solid wood there. And then he knew it was their own chair. He whispered to Molly, Do you remember last year when somebody made our wishing chair invisible and we had to get some paint to make it visible again? Oh, yes, whispered back Molly. I do remember. And we didn't have enough paint to make one little bit at the back of the chair become visible again. So it always looks as if there's a hole there, though there isn't really. And that was because they were messing about with all the paint, remember? So they didn't have enough. Yes, and that's the place that poor Polly has been polishing and polishing, said Peter. Well, now we know that this is our chair all right. If only it would grow its wings and we could sit on it straight away and wish ourselves home again. He ran his fingers down the legs of the chair to see if by any chance there were some bumps growing that would mean wings were coming once more, but they weren't. Perhaps the wings will grow again this evening, said Molly. Let's go and have tea with the elf in his treehouse and then come back here again and see if the chair has grown its wings. The elf was very pleased to think that they would come back to tea with him. Before they went, Peter looked hard at the chairs. You know, he said to Molly. I think we'd better just tie a ribbon around our own chair, so that if by any chance we decided to take it and go home with it quickly before anyone could stop us, we'd know immediately which one it was. That's a good idea, said Molly. She had no hair ribbon, so she took her little blue handkerchief and knotted it round the right arm of the chair. What are you doing that for? Asked Polly Polish in surprise. Oh, we'll tell you another time, Polly, said Molly. Don't untie it, will you? It's to remind us of something. We'll be back again after tea. They went off with the elf. He asked them to see if they could find his door handle and turn it to get into his tree house. But however much they looked and felt about, neither of them could make out where the closely fitting door was. It's no wonder nobody ever knows where the tree houses are. The elf had to open the door for them himself, and in they went. He got them a lovely tea, with pink jellies that shone like a sunset, and blancmange that he had made in the shape of a little castle. Oh, I do wonder if Binky's woken up yet, said Molly at last. No, thank you, elf. I couldn't possibly eat any more. It was a really lovely tea. Now, what about getting back to the shop and seeing if we can't take our chair away, said Peter. We'll send Binky to explain about it later. The thing is, we really must take it quickly, or that goblin called Tricky will send someone to buy all the set and our chair with it. So off they went to the shop, and will you believe it? Of course, there were no chairs there. I saw that coming, I bet you did too. They were all gone from the window. The children stared in dismay. They went into the shop. What's happened to the chairs? They asked Polly. Oh, we had such a bit of luck just after you'd gone, said Polly. Someone came by, noticed the chairs, and said that the goblin Tricky had advised him to buy them, and paid for them straight away. Who was he? Asked Peter, his heart sinking. Let me see. His name was Mr. Spells, said Polly, looking in a book, and his address is Wizard Cottage. He seemed very nice indeed. Oh dear, said Peter, leading Molly out of the shop. Now we've really lost our dear old chair. Don't give up, said Molly. We'll go back to Binky, tell him the whole story, and maybe he will know something about this Mr. Spells and be able to get our chair back for us. Binky is very clever. Yes, but before we can get it back from Mr. Spells, that wretched goblin Tricky will be after it again, said Peter. He's sure to go and take it from Mr. Spells. The elf took them home again. They went into the playroom. Binky wasn't there. There was a note on the table. It said, Fancy you going off without me. I've gone to look for you. Love, Binky. Oh, bother, said Molly. How annoying. Here we've come back to look for him and he's gone to look for us. Now we'll have to wait till tomorrow. And you'll have to wait till tomorrow to have the next chapters. Well, this is quite a long adventure, isn't it? I'm sure they'll get the chair back. Sure they will, especially with Binky's help. Okay, so chapter 5 is Off to Mr. Spells or Wizard Cottage. You're pleased to be back with the wishing chair. I've got to say, I am enjoying it. Love you loads. See you soon. Mwah.